Hi everybody, this is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Saturday, September the 8th, and welcome to our video commentary. Today we're going to do a little history. We're going to go back to September the 8th, 1974, and what came to be known as the Nixon pardon. Just to put it in some context, the Watergate scandal had really consumed the Nixon presidency. And by the summer of 1974, there were articles of impeachment that had been introduced in the U.S. House. And it seemed very likely that articles of impeachment would pass the House and that Nixon would be impeached. That summer, also, the Supreme Court forced in a 9-0 vote the president to release some of the tapes and, of course, some of the more damning evidence about his cover-up and all of that were in those recordings. So on August the 8th, President Nixon went to the nation in an evening speech, and he announced that he would be resigning the presidency effective the next day at noon. On August the 9th at noon, he left Washington, and Gerald Ford, who had been vice president, became the president of the United States. And at first there was a great deal of relief. I think Gerald Ford was seen by most people as a pretty decent guy. He was, and continues to be seen, I think, that way by most people. About a month later, on September the 9th, President Ford decided to pardon Richard Nixon. Now, his explanation was that the matters of Richard Nixon were consuming his presidency to the point that he couldn't do the job because there were so many things having to do with Nixon that were constantly interfering with his performance as president. And I think that was exactly correct. So he pardoned President Nixon on this day 44 years ago. And that created a huge backlash, generally on a partisan level. I think most level-headed people saw the pardon for what it was. It was simply a way of putting the problem behind us and not, letting the new president linger with more Watergate stuff. But obviously it was very partisan. The Democrats used it in the midterm. The Democrats had a great midterm against President Ford. And politically, the decision was very costly for President Ford and for the Republicans that year. It sort of set the table, really, for the election of Jimmy Carter in 1976. Now, as time passed, the pardon has begun to look a lot better. And in fact, in 2009, the Kennedy Institute or the Kennedy Library or something in Massachusetts gave President Ford the 2001 Profiles in Courage Award for a man who did something very courageous at a great political price. And it probably cost Gerald Ford the 1976 election. I have no doubt about that. And it probably cost the Republicans a lot of seats in the midterm of 1974. But as time passes and people have a little distance, the passions disappear with time. There's no question that it was the right thing to do. By the way, if you want to read more about the pardon, the Gerald Ford autobiography that he wrote after he left office is just an absolutely great book. It's called A Time to Heal. Just a great book about the process that led him to the pardon of Richard Nixon. And I think as time passes, of course, President Ford died in 2006, and it looks a lot better now. It looks more and more like the pardon was the right thing to do. It didn't look that way, though, to a lot of people 44 years ago today. Well, thank you for watching. We have all of these videos over at YouTube, at Twitter, and at my blog. And if September 8th is your birthday, happy birthday. Bye-bye, everybody.